From the towering tales of ancient Greek mythology, to the luscious landscapes of endless deserts, to the stark sharpness of black and whites mixed with cascading colors, Santa Monica Studio has provided masterful, play-worthy experiences that have captured the imagination of PlayStation gamers for more than a decade. Jouney, an indie darling presented in partnership with That Game Company, is an emotional, complex, and anonymous voyage, told as an interactive parable, beautifully challenging our definition of cooperative gameplay while contrasting it against an isolated world featuring rolling sand dunes, age-old ruins, caves, and howling winds. The unfinished Swan, presented in partnership with Giant Sparrow, gave gamers a curious foray into mesmerizing gameplay by wandering through a surreal and storybook-inspired kingdom armed with the painted weapon of revelation, providing new meaning to what it means to explore. And of course, God of War, a heart-racing, action-packed franchise with the most imposing and driven PlayStation protagonist to date, powered by an engine of progressive gameplay mechanics that with each iteration of the franchise proved to be game-changing. These are just a few examples of Sony Santa Monica's drive to innovate new worlds with new behaviors and to foster an environment where indie developers who share that same passion can see their worlds come true. On this episode of Conversations with Creators, I will sit down and discuss Santa Monica Studio's unique approach to game creation and delivery with studio head Shannon Studstill, creative director Cory Barlog, creative director Nathan Gary, and lead combat designer Jason McDonald. When people think of PlayStation games, we're like, oh, what is a PlayStation game? You think of God of War. It's like one of the canonical PlayStation games. So I would love to go all the way back to the beginning. What came together developing this particular game at that particular time?
The choice to bring God of War to the studio was made pretty much right off the tails of Kinetica. It was the first game that we had made. It was a racing game, very early tools, very young team. And Dave and I had talked a little bit about what the next step for the studio, Dave Jaffe, would be. And, he had this grand vision of what at that point was what we called Dark Odyssey. Looking back, we didn't really have, it was basically his vision and pretty much that was it. We didn't have an engine that could really translate action-adventure game or a team that had done a title like that before. So it was one challenge after the next to try to build the foundation of what we know today as one of the pillar franchises. And Cory was actually the lead animator on God of War 1. And I think that's when everything started to click. And
when I got there, Dave actually described Kratos as Martin Riggs and Maximus from Gladiator. And that was it. And he was like, go.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that really helps. I could totally figure this out. But I think... there was a time in the development of that when there was Japanese developers saying Western developers will never make a good action-adventure game. They kind of just flat out had said, the good action-adventure games are Japanese games. The Western developers just don't have the right sensibility for it. And that was like our challenge. We were like, all right, cool. Yeah. We'll do that. We'll take it on. And I think that fueled us through a lot of that to kind of go, look, we're going to pick the best parts of every game we played, the Castlevanias, the Rygars, and Zelda, and mash it all together and just make the game that we want to play. That was a big part.
Kratos is such an iconic character and is one of those characters that you don't even have to play the game to know who he is. Do you remember the first time you saw someone cosplay as him?
It's Cory, actually.
Did you cosplay as Kratos at a trade show?
Not get into that embarrassing moment. No, I think it was on the release of the first one we had somebody dress up as Kratos. And then we had that weird viral campaign, the Yosoi Kratos.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah. Was there anything that really surprised you? Was there a thing that you just...
liked it.
Really? Did you really have... I mean, listen, we all sit down to create things, and I think that part of what drives us to be creative is that constant, like, I call it Carrie's mom, you know, going, they're all going to laugh at you, they're all going to laugh at you.
You're always trying to do better. I think that, to me, is the cycle that I'm driving at. But I honestly, at the end, thought, oh, this is really cool, but it did surprise me.
There's things that happen in God of War 1 that I think we kind of take for granted, but when it originally came out, things like completely shifting the perspective to get a different kind of gameplay experience, making puzzles kind of like just difficult enough to be satisfying, but not so difficult that it goes like nothing drives me crazier than a video game asserting itself as a video game, right? When you get to like, and now it is a boss level, and I'm totally out of the narrative.
I think part of it is, like I know since God of War 1, there was always 3 pillars to the game that everybody would always talk about, where we had combat, we had navigation, and we had the puzzle solving. And I think every game always tried to have a healthy mix of all of those 3, so you don't, you know, of course there's a lot of combat and a lot of Kratos killing things all the time, but when you're not doing that, there's actually some interesting puzzle solving, some interesting layout, and I think all of it together is actually what makes God of War what it is and why it kind of can stand alone.
So striking that balance, what is your testing process like to find that balance of like, all right, this is hard, but not too hard? And
well, I think it's a lot of playtesting. Like that's a big theme of our studio, like ever since God of War 1, where, you know, as Cory said, we'll play the game and we can't really tell. We're really close to it. So we bring as many people as we can in, and we all watch them play creepily in the distance, like with a camera.
Because then you watch it and then you go, there's like all egos go away, and it's just like, okay, yeah, this is too hard, or this was wrong, or we took this for granted.
So they're constantly arguing is basically what Nate's saying.
But then playtesters are kind of the thing that decide who wins the argument.
Right.
Yeah.
Or we both lost.
It is very...
But there's always arguments, so you guys are always in playtest proving who's right or who's wrong.
But I imagine that creative tension's really great because it forces you to come up with something where, like, I mean, Game of the Year award after Game of the Year award after Game of the Year award, and we're like 10 years on since we first played it, and we have this character. This is one media outlet called Kratos, the single most impressive looking character ever in video games.
Oh, fantastic.
Awesome.
I mean, that's great. I mean,
Take that, Bubsy.
think about that, right? I mean, I have an English teacher who told me I was stupid and I'd never be a good writer. So when my first book was published, I like thanked her in it.
Oh,
like,
that's fantastic.
yeah, you know. So when you hear things like that, do you feel
Suck
like,
it.
are you like, yeah?
That is a little bit of vindication. It's nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it still doesn't make up for the fact that the Hades levels were probably not tested enough, but that's a good example of, like, you know, playtesting is so integral to get other people's opinions and actually be able to sift through the opinion and the confusion, you know, so that it's like, oh, okay, well, that's a subjective thing and it's not really in line with what we want to achieve, or actually that one is really good and that's going to make the game better.
You're heading into like the 4th generation of hardware since you started this. Would you talk a little bit about the different iterations of the game and the like how you used the hardware, maybe where you were limited and how it informed your game design choices?
I mean, like, you know, God of War 1 in particular, when it came out, we were pushing the PS2 pretty hard, you know, and it was always one of the best looking games, so we knew that after we got out of PS2 and we had to make PS3 game, you know, we had to keep that. We wanted to maintain that, and we wanted to figure out how to make it so, you know, people are just as impressed with God of War 3 as they were with God of War 1 when it first came out. So part of that was Cory Barlog's sweet ending of ending Kratos right on the Titan's shoulder, you know. And then for God of War 3, we had to figure out, okay, well, how do we actually make this happen? And we actually tackled it head on without like trying to find some excuse why you fell off her shoulder or something like that. Because that would have been the easy way out. So we figured out a way to actually make the Titans kind of come to life. And I think, you know, for PS3, you know, even to this day, it still stands out as like one of the, probably some of the most exciting sequences we made in God of War game.
It's sort of this weird loop we got caught into of like trying to top ourselves every time, you know, and that first one, pushing it that we had progressive scan, 60 frames a second, no loading. You know, and no loading was one of those things that was constantly pushed of like, we're loading, we're just hiding it all the time. And figuring out with each hardware iteration, The 1 and 2 were both on the PS2, so it was awesome. We already knew a lot of magic tricks, and we only had to learn a few more. But then going to PS3, it was all about like, okay, we have to learn all new magic tricks, but still try to make Titans a reality.
Right.
So it is very hard to get caught in that I think never-ending loop of topping yourself, because eventually it's going to be impossible. So you got to figure out a new way to blow people away.
How do you deal with the expectations?
What has made God of War successful for so many years is that concept of having the core singular vision of like, I have this idea, and then everyone starts to hang little pieces on the idea to try to build a much bigger, cleaner, crisper, sharper version of that core idea. It was a David versus Goliath, it seemed, in all the earlier ones, but maybe that's different now. You look at a lot of games today, they seem to be all about huge worlds, gigantic worlds, which I guess is kind of cool. I don't feel like I want every game to be like that, though. I would get bored.
I'm curious to know what it sounds like Cory got into a little bit, Shannon, since you've been around since the beginning, the philosophical pillars that are like the foundation of Santa Monica Studio. Like, what would those be?
For me, they've always been communications key. We've always had kind of low wall desks, no offices. So that anyone can stand up, look around, see what someone else is working on, and it inspires them, hopefully, to do better. Collaboration is another piece to Santa Monica. I think we're a highly collaborative studio. We are crafting within the walls, and that really, I think, differentiates us from a lot of some of the dev teams that are active today. And I think one of my hidden sort of, gems is compromise. Everyone needs to kind of give a little bit and come together on the vision and, really embody where we're all going together. And because of the technology limitations and challenges and the opportunities to build on, great hardware, we've got to find new paths and new ways to get there. So I think those three, along with quality. Quality is number one. And I think the products that we've had over the course of 15 years, 35 strong titles, have all shown that. It's something that we are collectively very proud of.
When I was talking with Treyarch about putting together the Call of Duty series, and they have these three sort of like different kind of things that all come on the same disc that all work with the same game. Different departments will sometimes need to kind of like fight over the same resource. Like, we need this group to do this thing. Do you ever encounter that? That's
the compromise part, and I think we're very fortunate at Santa Monica to work with a bunch of creatives that are willing to go above and beyond. And the crew's always willing to jump in and give it their all.
There's a lot of damned if you do, damned if you don't, though.
Yeah.
A lot of that, like, all right, you're going to lose this if you want that.
That's the world he lives in.
I live in a very hostile, everyone's taking my toys kind of world.
Have you ever lost a thing from one part of a game and it's found its way into another part?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Hercules.
Yeah?
It's a different game completely.
Yeah?
No, Hercules
Yeah.
got to work too.
Demos, and I wrote the script for Sparta. It was because we had cut Demos out of another thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, cool, I'll use it for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's we recycle.
He gets it back.
And Hercules was actually trying to do a lift door in God of War 2.
Yes.
Yep.
And then that got cut in with 3 months to go. And then it became a really good boss fight in God of War 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one I'll
part of the
totally
game,
admit. I wanted to kill him just like you just arrive and you lift up a lift door and then just kill him with a lift door. So like
Just like one move.
yeah, like the most famous.
Why do you hate Hercules, Dad?
Hercules, like, I just wanted him to die quickly. But I thought that was cool. But actually, the boss fight in 3 was fantastic. So sort of made up for my dumb idea.
It probably seems ridiculous to talk about what is ancient history for you guys, but because it's so recent for me, like playing God of War 1 for the first time, fighting against that Hydra at the very, very, very beginning was really satisfying for me. And I'm not a person who likes boss fights. I just find boss fights to really be just like, stop making me grind through.
Because they usually are that. They're usually like skill tests where you just got to be super awesome as opposed to. It was more thoughtful. It was about like, okay, observe the environment, figure out how to use it against them. And when you get to that point where you're like, I know what to do, it's not that hard to get there.
Yeah.
So although sometimes we, I made it a little bit too hard on certain things.
That was one of the last levels we designed.
Yeah, we usually do that. Yeah, we always wait for the first level is the last level we do.
Oh, that's so interesting, because you're able to take what you've experienced during the entire development process and let the player have that like right at.
So then you know exactly what to do in the beginning to differentiate everything else.
A lot of what you want to do, you're able to do at that point within the game development.
We did a thing where we asked members of the PlayStation Nation to submit questions on the PlayStation blog, because I thought it would be cool to ask you guys things that they wanted to know about instead of hoping the things that I want to know about happen to overlap with them.
You play tested.
This is the question. Player experience is the lifeblood of projects developed both externally and in-house at Santa Monica Studios. What is it that you think makes your games so creative and fun to play? And what is your favorite part of the creation process?
It is the idea of constantly soliciting feedback, constantly engaging outside voices to give us the straight dope. Like, if they hate it, that's great, because we want to know why they hate it, how we can make it better. We start with the idea that we like. We think this would be really fun, but we test the theory and determine whether or not we're crazy or, hey, that's a really great idea.
Because it's kind of a creatively driven studio, there's still egos involved, but it's kind of you get to a point of like Cory. But there is a bit of like egolessness of people wanting to make the best thing possible. And once you kind of get everybody bought on with that and kind of moving together, when that works properly, I think that's kind of the special sauce that you can get out of a really good Santa Monica game.
What's your favorite part of the creation process?
6 months in, where it's like you've got all these big grand ideas, and then you start kind of seeing how they're going to all kind of funnel and work together and start to overlap. That can sometimes take 2 years, to be totally fair. But it's basically that part where you've gone from like, wow, we have this huge kind of like broad grand idea, and then it starts to kind of, you start to see it take shape, you can start to see it form, and you can start to get a sense and a feel of what that's going to be. And it's a really kind of magical time in the game, at least for me. That's probably
Have you had an experience where you sort of start out and you think a game's going in one direction and you get to that point and realize, you know, this is not what we thought it was going to be?
All the time. I mean, my first experience with that was God of War 2. I mean, we were making a totally different game for the first 9 months of that game, like 9 months of that game. And then I think we essentially jettisoned everything except for Kratos mechanics.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So tell me about that day.
When God of War 1 finished and we came back, you know, after everyone went on vacation, we came back and we had a script of God of War 2, which was like which wouldn't be what the actual game was going to end up being.
Yeah.
So for a long time we were basing it on that script, and a lot of production was going, and then at one day, like it just changed. Like it was something completely new, and it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't completely new. I mean, there were some elements that were kind of shared, but there was enough new there that I was like, okay, we're starting over. Did
that come out of the mechanics of how you were building it, or did it come out of the narrative of the way you were seeing the story evolve?
It came out of my crappy first draft.
I was going to say, when is Cory going to start?
Yeah, that's really like, I think it was Jaffe and Studstill in an office with me, sitting across from me and being like, all right, Barlog, this is not really that good. You know, and I think I had the Wind Waker ambitions. Like, so Kratos was taking a boat to like all these different islands and stuff. It was just insane. But what was great about it is part of that whole process. Now you remember, right? What was he thinking?
He was traveling
that
all
never
over
made it back in the game.
Universe.
I wrote that first draft with my dad and had realized that like we had these crazy ambitions. And I was steering us in such wild, bizarre ways and not really seeing the forest for the trees. And what was fascinating is that, you know, writing something with your dad is a very interesting experience because you just clash all the time. But it's the good creative clashing, you know, the kind that you hang up and then I'm not gonna call you for 24 hours, you know? Then you call, I'm sorry. Like, it was kind of interesting because I realized like that's it. That's the story. It's the father-son dynamic of like, oh, there it is. It's Kratos and Zeus. That's where it is. So it was a cool organic process, but at the same time, you know, that meeting sucked. When, you know, Javi's like, this is terrible, dude. What are you doing? And I was just, nonsense. I
would say that after that change happened, everybody got on board really quick, and it just started moving forward at like such a rapid pace. Yeah, it was really exciting. It was a good time.
And then, I mean, the combat went through some of that change too, because I remember initially there was supposed to be like, I think literally 16 magics or something crazy in the game for Kratos. Yeah.
I think we went
and it was like that for a very long time until like around that time where the story kind of shifted and everything shifted, and then you get to a position where you're in dreamland, you have all these ideas, like the 16 magics, like that was one of them. And then what ends up happening is that you're like, okay, you distill it down to like the best ones, and that actually ends up probably being the best thing that you could have done, but you just didn't realize that previously. So,
as a writer, I treat that stuff as sort of like the scaffolding that I have to use maybe to get to a thing. I think it's an entirely legitimate part of the creative process.
Just when you're limited and bound by time,
sure,
it's scary as all hell.
Yeah,
right?
and
you just want to say, guys, get it together, but you know it's not that easy. They're trying their best, but it's
interesting because I love the beginning blank page part, the everything that's not reality. And then I hate the reality part. I hate being smacked in the face by reality.
But for me, like
look, man, you can only do 4 magic, seriously.
Like when you look back and you see what you actually did to create the product, and you're like, oh, that was pretty good. And you're like, man, why don't we just make all those decisions sooner?
Right.
But a lot of those decisions you wouldn't have made if you didn't go through that process to begin with. So.
Game development is essentially like a U, right? If you plot it. It's like you start really high and you're really excited, you have like tons of ideas, and then like over the course of the next couple months, you're like, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. And then you kind of figure it out, and then it starts building back up to that excitement again.
Yeah.
But you get into some pretty like scary places.
Yeah. And I guess that's not unusual. Naughty Dog talks about that all the time.
Yeah.
Throwing out Ellie 6 months before they shipped.
I imagine it never gets easier.
This gets more expensive.
Yeah, right?
Well, it's like if you're writing, right? You write a draft, then you're like, think about it and move it. But like with games, it's like you kind of have to make part of the game, which takes a lot of time and people. And so you make a part of the game, and that could take like months. And then you're like, oh, crap, this didn't work, right? And so then you have to kind of move on.
You know, once you see kind of the crappy version of it, you're like, well, I remember what we wanted, and now I see what we have, and you can kind of mold it into what it should have been in the first place.
So let's shift gears away from the like grand scope of God of War, and like there's really big titles, and talk about indie development. Because it is something that I care a great deal about. Most of the games I play are indie games. So it seems like indie development is just like, it is fundamentally part of the DNA at Santa Monica Studios. And how, so why? And does it at all touch the other aspects of some of the bigger titles that you all work on?
Wow, okay. So for me, and this is kind of to that where it permeates the kind of culture, is that we do play tests, and we'll do play tests of external games with internal, like, God of War team. And I play tested a game called Flower that was like 9 months into development. And it kind of blew my mind because I was like, you can make games like this, right? And it was kind of super inspiring to me, and kind of made me want to make that leap to external and start to kind of explore those spaces. I mean, I think kind of part of the DNA of the studio is that kind of creative driven and always searching for these kind of new experiences. And a lot of that, I think, also came from Alan Becker. And so he really kind of spearheaded a lot of that early stuff with like Flow and Everyday Shooter and the original Fat Princess.
Nate very much carries that legacy.
Yeah.
Very much so for that department and that team, and all the relationships that we have with developers that are worldwide.
It is really remarkable to me that you're a studio that can give us God of War and then can also give us like Jouney. They could not be more different.
We have opportunities to bring veteran level talent out of internal development into the incubation teams that we have. So there's a really interesting crossover there where people that are down in the trenches of AAA are able to spend some time on indie development and helping some of these younger creators really translate their vision. It's
like a two-way street too, because I think like everybody gets really inspired when they see like what Edith Finch is turning into. It just, it inspires people when you see those kind of things, that those things are also being made under the one kind of roof.
I talked to Ian Dallas, the director on Giant Sparrow. And he was talking about their process, their creative process, how they kind of storyboard, how they kind of use Post-it notes and kind of quickly iterate on things. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. So I got the whole team together and had them do like a little seminar, which was talking through their creative process, which I think was great because it inspired a lot of the people on the team, but also kind of showed them a way that nobody really thought of because it's a far more agile, very fast, you know, hey, check this out, what about that? Like they're making the game with Post-it notes, which I thought was fantastic. So I think having the incubations in-house is just awesome. It is truly a two-way street.
There's so much interest in wanting to help, you know, like that cross-visionary support. And that goes, you know, from animators to designers to producers. Just people want to help each other to realize what that goal is.
The ethos that you're describing is actually a thing that comes up over and over and over again when we do these shows. Like I just keep hearing over and over again, I'm so inspired by the people that I work with, and they lift me up and they make me work harder. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that that seems to be part of the fundamental philosophy. Is like, yeah, let's all work really hard together to make an awesome thing.
I mean, on the God of War team, I know it was always like that for us. You want to make sure that you're on the level of everyone else, and it's always been something where it's like you have that healthy competition kind of within the studio.
There's like this friendly rivalry that goes on about what people are working on, but at the same time, if Jason was working on something that I thought was, oh, I'm so jealous, but like I need his help on my thing, he'll totally like come in, like help me out. Like it's a team that just wants to build each other up.
Yeah.
Even in the kind of spirit of that kind of friendly rivalry that you have going on.
I really want to nerd out about Jouney for a minute. I have not been like emotionally affected by a game the way I was by that. I got, in preparation to meet you all today, I got a copy of the game. That game became like a meditation for me. It became this like rejuvenative, restorative thing that I could like play and really unwind. When I finally finished the game, I actually just felt like, I felt kind of sad that it was over. And like I missed my companions that I had picked up along the way. I did not know until a couple of days after I finished my first playthrough that I was playing with other people. I had no idea. That is groundbreaking for me in games. And I don't know if I really have a question to go with this, which makes me a bad host, but I'm just so like, I'm so fascinated by that. And that nobody like really, it doesn't seem to be like called out. It's like a thing that you discover.
That was the whole point of the game, was to have like authentic connections with other human beings anonymously, right? That you can really like feel that empathy. Basically, here's the funny thing about online games. If there's anything that you could troll someone with, people will troll. Like, so that's why there's no character.
On the internet?
So there's no. So it's essentially part of it. It was also just figuring out how do you kind of strip away the things that people can grief other people with. Yeah. And just kind of, once people understand that like this is like what this kind of game is, it's like that. All that kind of goes away. And I don't think people even go into thinking like, oh, I want to grief somebody, or how do I grief someone here? It just becomes a place
organically
that they're with another human being experiencing the game.
I was on a level in Jouney, and there was like one of those little glowing symbol things, and I really wanted to get it, and I realized that I couldn't get it unless the other helper person jumped up and we kind of boosted each other so I could get to the thing. And I'm looking at it and jumping and not getting there, and then I realize that the other little helper person, who I still don't know as a person, has been jumping and like chirping at me and jumping and chirping at me like, come over, this is where we go, this is what we do. Yeah. And when I finally figured that out, I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I still don't know it's a person. Yeah. And I find out like 48 hours later, I've made this deeply human connection with another person, and I don't know who they were or where they were or what they were about.
It's an interesting cycle, I think, that some people go through with Jouney, is that they go from, like, a lot of times what happens, especially when you play now, is you go through and there's people that kind of take on guide roles in that game where they'll lead you around and help you and show you things. And then it kind of takes on this life cycle. Then people that had that experience, then they want to share that experience with someone else. And so they'll kind of help guide someone through the space. And it's really cool, just the way like people will literally like, they will guide, like they wait and they want to take people through the experience.
It has like a mystical sense to it that I really, really like. And this is a thing that kind of runs through other games that you guys have, have sort of touched on as well, including Unfinished Swan. And then we have sort of like the ancient kind of mythological stuff that is so just fundamentally part of God of War. Like, does this come from, is this a thing that originates with a person at the studio?
I think at the beginning, didn't Dave have like 2 or 3 things written down, and one of them was like Greek mythology game? And it was like, well, let's do that one. You know, it was fortuitous because I think that's a brilliant decision. There's so much life and depth to not just Greek mythology, but all kinds of mythology. It's so much of a telling kind of manuscript of a culture.
I don't know, I think there's probably something to be said for having spaces that feel lived in a little. Like for me at least, like, you know, it's like you look at Jouney, like that's a place that tells a story.
And I think it's also just the fantasy element to it all. Like, you know, 'cause God of War at its core is a fantasy, even though it's like there's brutality and it's, you know, it's pretty harsh here and there, but it really is a fantasy, and it kind of calls to you know, everybody's love for things like the pyramids or just the old relics that are still kind of around the world. I think it's just something, like Cory said, there's so many stories, there's so much there that it kind of doesn't get old, like the mythology aspect of it.
I think a lot of other teams, you've got X amount of dollars and X amount of time, and you're on a crash course of mechanical, get through it, you're a machine. And we're able to throw some stuff away and again, learn from that, and all that contributes to, you know, quality product that I think is more of an art than it is a machine.
I think indie development is inspiring people to realize, look, we can have a larger message in the game. There is a point of view in every sort of creative endeavor, and being able to actually implement that is so unique, because you're right, there's so many other studios where it's the bottom line is get it done. You know, the board of directors has said, you have this much time, we have to make this window of release, and it needs to get this Metacritic, you know, nothing about the game.
So the indie kind of community is great for being able to take, you know, some additional risks, like Jouney, where you don't have to be wowed just by a graphical showpiece or something like that. It's actually you know, you're feeling when you play the game that you remember.
Yeah.
Though it is also one of the most beautiful games.
But it looks great too.
Yeah.
To make something like that, you feel like, wow, this is a gorgeous experience.
true, yeah.
I don't look at it as an indie game. I look at it as just a beautiful game.
Because the style is amazing.
Yeah.
You guys are all veterans of the game industry, and you have been involved in the games industry through some significant changes in societally and technologically, and I would love your perspective on, say, the last 10 or 15 years of the games industry.
It's less far-reaching for me, but I mean, I had 2 children, right, in the last 3 years, and I think for me, that's been a pretty huge thing for the way I kind of approach things and think about things. So it's like having games that can be kind of shared and kind of bring the kind of younger generation into what I think is kind of special about console gaming, sitting in front of the TV, turning that console on, grabbing that controller. You know, I want my kids to have that experience and kind of grow up with that.
I think heart has also been put to the forefront more in games. Like before, it was a lot of the crates and scientists and you know, shooters. But I feel like the concept of a game having a heart, you having its really personal point of view.
For me, it's just seeing all the mediums kind of get taken seriously. It's not just wow you with just putting motion on the screen, because we've seen that already.
I think we're evolving, we're changing. It's like the film industry has had so many decades on us, but they went through probably the same growing pains to reach where they're at now. And I think we're kind of going through the same thing of coming into our own as an art form, and the audiences are looking for more, you know? Like they want an experience to grab them. Something even as simple as, what is it, Thomas Was Alone? Right? Friendship and jumping with little blocks, right? Fantastic. I think this idea of connecting people and connecting with people on a human level is great. That's what gaming to me is about, is experiencing the human experience in a more active way. It's not the passive watch a movie, which is great, but I'm involved. I'm the center of this. I'm changing. I have agency in this.
And I think that also the kids that grew up kind of like playing all the little games when it wasn't taken as seriously are now kind of at an age where they want to take them seriously, and in some cases, like me, like actually developing the games as well. So it just gives additional perspective where it's like, okay, I remember what I enjoyed about the old games. I also see kind of what's new, you know, what's more
little
appealing.
games, as you said.
No,
Which one are those?
Well, dude, like 'cause my parents used to watch me play the games, and they would just talk down not just to me, but just to the game. Where it's like, what is this? Like, what are you doing? Like,
What is
just
this
see a
crap?
little
Why are you wasting your
tiny
time?
character jumping around and like, what is that? And they just couldn't take it seriously. They couldn't see past it.
Don't you see?
But there was obviously something there because people like those games, and even new games today that do have a little bit more to them. They still apply a lot of the same concepts that those old games had that made them popular.
So what is next for Santa Monica Studios in this world in which we find ourselves? Where are you headed?
Back to work.
We just did our post E3 summit, this little gathering of all the studio people.
You gotta be really careful right now.
I gave a horrible speech, but I was blown away with how awesome, and then this sounds like a bunch of company puffery, but honestly, speaking from the heart, I was blown away how awesome it is to be making games right now.
Yeah.
Like, to the lineup that we have, the stuff we're working on, it scared the hell out of me and made me want to go back to work and work harder, and that's awesome, because it's a great time to be playing games, to be a gamer. To actually be consuming this content. So, I think what we have is exciting. I don't know how specific we can get.
Journey on PS4 is stunning, 1080p, 60 frames. Everybody's Gone to the Rapture from the Chinese room is in August, early August, which is, I think, going to be a great game. And then Fat Princess will be later this year as well. And then next year, what we announced is What Remains of Edith Finch, which is shaping up to be like mind-blowingly amazing.
Is there anything in this new technology that we're looking at, like that we're closing in on, that you guys are excited about?
Yes.
That's fair
Lots
enough.
of cool stuff.
Lots of neat things.
Sorry, Internet, I tried my best. I want to thank you so much for sitting down and spending this time with us today. And seriously, for making my life more fun with just really awesome, great stuff. And congratulations on all of your successes.
Thank you.
Has there ever been a thing that you were just dying to do and you got really close to to pulling it off, and just for whatever reason, the hardware wouldn't support it, or there was like some technical thing that got in your way?
We did want to do that sock puppet musical of God of War, which I thought of it. It's not really a technical limitation.
Terrific.
It would have been badass, right?
Yeah,
I think like that Angel episode where they all became puppets.
Yeah.
So are you
I think
saying
it'd have been
you got
amazing.
everything you ever wanted?
Oh no, that's right. I probably should change my answer. No,
I'm sorry, Sock Puppet Musical is out there. It's already, I've written it down. Sock Puppet Musical.
PlayStation